Make me a believer. Make me a believer. Make me a believer. Make me a believer.
Hi everyone, my name is Shelbi and I work as a retail dietitian with the Greenfield ShopRite in Comac. We are going to be opening a store in the New Hyde Park area and I will be the dietitian there for the first few months. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some really basic principles that if I was sitting with any one of you one-on-one, I would probably be addressing in one of the first 1 or 2 sessions. And they're just some relatively easy things that you can start doing so that this year your nutrition is just as new as the year and you get off to a really good start. So the basic concept that we're going to talk about today, I want you to be thinking about what I call the 4 Ps, and that's portion, produce, plant-based, and pack your own. And those are kind of going to be the base for some easy goals that you can set for yourself to start doing in the new year that don't necessarily involve going on a crazy diet or restricting certain food groups. These are just basic healthy things that if you start doing them and making them a part of your everyday, you will start to see healthy changes without having to drive yourself crazy. How many people in here come January 1st or the first Monday of the new year every year, they pick out like a new trendy diet or have picked out like a new diet to try? I know I have. No? Really? Okay. Well, that's good because most of the time fad diets are just that. They're trendy and they're not really meant to last your whole life. What I'm about in the way that I like to counsel and instruct people when it comes to nutrition is you don't want to lose weight for 2 months and then gain it all back down the road. That's never really the goal of weight loss. It's to get to a healthy weight or a healthy body that you can feel comfortable in and feel comfortable maintaining. And really, even though it sounds sort of hyperbole, you want to maintain it for the rest of your life. So you don't want to be picking anything that you can do that's not going to be sustainable. So hopefully these sort of themes are stuff that you can kind of get on board with, and then hopefully those healthy changes can carry you through to making some good decisions in the new year. So the most important one and the first one that we're going to address is portion. And portion is a great concept to remember that no food group needs to be restricted, and it is sort of the key concept to all foods in moderation. So the first thing with portion is checking the label. And I brought this bag of chips because even though this is what I talk about every day, 2 days ago, I found myself victim to something I think we all fall victim to all the time. We look at a bag like this and get what we consider to be an individual size bag. This one happens to be, if you look, it says serving size 1 bag, servings per container 1. And I'll pass that around. You can all look at the label there. So I had gotten these donated from a vendor, and I brought them to a community event. And they had sent me this other flavor of chip that it wasn't really as healthy as some of the other ones, so I just left it in my manager office and let them get unhealthy and didn't want to bring it out into the population. So I really wanted a snack, and I'm like, you know what, that 1 bag, it wasn't too bad. I'm going to grab this flavor, I'm going to eat it with my lunch. So I'm sitting there, I'm eating it, and for whatever reason, I turned the bag over, thinking it was the same size as that, and it was maybe a ½ an inch bigger, taller. And I look and it says servings per container 2. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This tiny little bag, all this nutrition information, it's for 2 servings. And it's things like that that we don't think it should matter that much, that it's, a couple hundred calories here, or a lot of times in beverages. They are the biggest culprits to you buy a 16-ounce beverage thinking that the nutrition label and the sugar in that bottle is for the whole bottle, but it's really 2 servings. Sometimes that can mean consuming up to 40 or 50 grams of sugar in just 1 beverage. So you really have to be aware of checking the label and checking what the serving size says. The next thing is to measure. Measuring cups, just to have 1, even if that is your measuring 1, just do it in the beginning. I'm not going to sit here and say that anyone should be counting out every day and getting themselves crazy over measuring and that level of portion control. But that being said, some things that are good is having a size bowl, let's say for cereal or oatmeal, that you know what a serving looks like when you pour it into that bowl. Or having containers that you know are about the size of the serving that you should have, and packing those types of food in those containers that you know are the right portion size, so that way you know that you're always kind of taking the right amount of whatever it is that you're eating. It can be really eye-opening when we measure. I did once with high school students. I had them pour out cereal into a bowl that they would normally take as their breakfast portion. And out of the 5 classes, all 5 of them poured double portions. One of them poured a triple portion of cereal because it was I think it was like a Frosted Flake or something. And it's a 3/4 cup serving is what that label is based on, which is just up to this line on this cup. So like filling it right there, that's a serving size. So sometimes it's not even like the cookies and the ice creams and the cakes and those sort of foods that we consider unhealthy that we know, all right, I gotta not have this as often. Sometimes it's the foods that are healthy, things like cereals and nuts and even grains, that all foods have calories and more is more. So portion controlling the unhealthy stuff, but also even the healthy stuff, just having an awareness of it becomes really important towards knowing how much to have and when. Yeah, of course.
That bag of chips is serving size 1 bag.
Correct.
And then servings 1. So does that mean you eat the whole bag? That's 1 serving?
Correct. Yes. Yes, that would be correct. The other one, what it said servings. I don't think it had like 1 bag. I think it just said serving size 2 per container. It'll always be pretty clear, like it'll say per container, per bag, per box if it's multiples. But if it says 1 and 1, then that label pertains to the entire container. So the other thing that you can do is kind of use the containers. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not healthy. No, and that I could probably do an entire presentation on like my hatred for most breakfast foods, because you're 100% right. A lot of them aren't so good for you. When it comes to something like a cereal, you might be better off mixing the plainer version, like a bran flake, with a little bit of the Frosted Flake to get that flavor. And that is in and of itself a method of portion controlling, where you're measuring and having just a little bit of the thing you want. Because certainly part of being healthy and making something sustainable is being satisfied. So there's always like those little tricks that you can do so you don't feel like you're living on, like rabbit food or something like that. But no, you're 100% right. It is beyond what the portion is. It's full of stuff that we don't want to be starting our day with. You are 100% right. Another thing we can do is use the box and that line about how many servings per container to our advantage. So I always like to talk about a box of pasta, for example. So if you ever looked at a 1-pound box of pasta, a serving of pasta is 2 ounces. So when we get into like the weight and when they're giving us the serving size per weight, it can be a little frustrating because most of us aren't gonna like whip out a food scale and be like, oh, let me weigh out my 1 ounce of chips. It's a lot easier when we have the measuring size. It's just a better visual. But sometimes if they tell us how many is in the box, then we can say, all right, if I have a 1-pound box of pasta and it's a 2-ounce serving, that's 8 servings per 1-pound box. So if you're making a pound box of pasta for a family of 4 and you're finishing it, then you each had 2 servings. So sometimes it's easier to think about it in how it's breaking up, like a pint of ice cream. If it's saying 4 servings, you should be eating that pint throughout 4 days, not 4 minutes. Yeah, so, so it's definitely sometimes the fraction can come in handy. And it's just, so, okay, so if I have a pint of ice cream, like the Ben Jerry's, the little ones, not like the gallon containers, but the little pints, it says, yep, it says servings per container, and it says 4. So like I've seen online, and I laughed because, I mean, it looks so small. A bag like that, sometimes it's visual. You're like, I refuse to believe this is 1 serving because it just doesn't look like as much as what I'm used to seeing, or like it should be enough. But if it's saying, a serving size, all the information on that label pertains to 1/4 of that container. So you would be multiplying everything on that container by 4. So if it's saying 200 calories per serving, a whole container would be 800. The sugar would be, you know, I don't know, 60, you know? So
Basically, I'm eating for 4 servings.
if you have a whole pint at once, right, it's 4 servings. Yep. And the same goes for pasta or for any big containers. It's just sometimes the math is like what it takes to be like, oh, okay. And it's funny that you brought that up because they actually are trying, well, they're considering, I don't think it's gonna happen, but they wanted to change the labels to be, instead of what a serving should actually be, they were gonna have the label read like what people normally eat. So, because they felt like it would make the math part easier, and in their minds, people would see it, and if people eat half the container, let's say on average, rather than saying there are 4 servings in the container, they would say 2, but you would see like 500 calories in this and this and that. And okay, well see, I'm glad that you said that, because when I read that article, I was like, I don't think that's gonna really work. But I just feel like people eat what they're gonna eat, regardless of like what the label says. So I think they should keep it to true servings, but maybe seeing it like visually, if like half the container is that much, maybe it would, I mean, you know, it works differently for everybody, but certainly looking at the label and doing the math for the amount that you actually eat, you have to kind of bring that into what you're eating overall in a day. So on the next page, I have a food group cheat sheet. And this is sort of the serving size for each of the different food groups. Yeah. Sure.
So for serving size, are there some like tricks that you can give, like just in case you don't have a serving cup, like you know, how much pasta is, or 3 ounces of meat is a record card, so
Right.
whatever your hand, or cheese is.
Absolutely. So on this page, I tried to put actual, like more shapes of stuff to kind of go along with some of them. But I can definitely, I could give you some more shapes for the ones that I didn't. For the protein, instead of a deck of cards, I like to do the palm of your hand, because I do think with the protein, it varies based on an individual size. So, you know, someone who's 5 foot, by all accounts, should have a smaller size palm than someone who's 5'7", and should be eating a little bit more than the person who's 5 foot. So I prefer to say palm of your hand for protein rather than the deck of cards, although that's fine if you want to go by that too. You're certainly not going to overdo it if you're going with that. With the vegetables, I put a cup raw and half a cup cooked, but to be honest with you, of all the food groups and all the foods out there, eat your vegetables. And I'm going to address that a little bit more, but that's the one thing that you really, you don't have to portion. You can eat, you know, as much vegetables as you want. It's going to fill you up. It's a great way to start a meal to try to help to curb your appetite if you are realizing, wow, I'm taking a lot of the carbohydrates, I'm taking like too much protein, and I need to cut back on that, but I don't want to be hungry. Add more vegetables. Add like a raw salad type course first, and up your intake of the cooked vegetable side dish that you might have made. So that way when you are making the portions of the meat and the starch smaller, you don't feel like you're missing out on the food because you've added more of the good for you stuff. So even though I put a cup raw and half a cup cooked, again, as long as it's not potatoes, sweet potato, corn, and peas, those 4 vegetables actually go into the grains, legumes, and starchy vegetable category, and those you do need to watch your portions. But excluding all of those, all the other vegetables you're good to go. As far as sizes go, with the fruit, you want to look for like tennis ball size, smaller pieces of fruit. So for your apples, your pears, your plums, you don't want to necessarily grab the biggest one that you can find, or the biggest ones that you could find, because a lot of times that's like eating 2 servings of fruit in one. And fruit is definitely the way to go to satisfy sweet cravings, if that'll do it for you, or even, you know, rather than having like ice cream, doing something like fruit and whipped cream and having fruit be a part of the dessert is going to make it better for you than some of these other sweet things that you can have. But especially if watching your blood glucose, watching your sugar, if you're pre-diabetic, if diabetes runs in the family, or if you are diabetic, then you do have to watch your serving size of fruit because there are natural fruit sugars, so you do have to watch to make sure you're not over-consuming. The big one, I think, is bananas. Most of the time, bananas are much larger than what a serving size is, so if they look larger, if they're not like the tinier ones, you're better off having half at one point in the day and half at another, because it is a lot to consume in usually one sitting with some of these larger size fruits. And then a cup of berries or cube melons would be for like those types of fruits. Yeah.
But if you're using the banana to make a smoothie, you can't use half of a banana.
Well, I'm glad you brought up smoothies. No, with the smoothies, those are one of those like very dangerous healthy foods, especially if you're not like making it yourself. If you go get a smoothie at one of these places, you might as well just go get the milkshake, because it's probably just as bad for you. Making your own, when it comes to smoothies, my rule is usually no more than 2 fruits. You should have 1 vegetable. You should have 1 serving of dairy, so whether you want to do 8 ounces of milk or if you want to do a container of Greek yogurt and then thin it out with the water. And then you can add in like some of the, I guess they call them like boosters, if you want to put a little protein powder, chia seed, maybe a little nut butter, something like that. But you really shouldn't have more than 2 fruits, because if you're starting your day with something that you're drinking that's sugary, that's going to spike your blood sugar, even though you have the fruits in there. So smoothies are great, and especially on the go, they're a great breakfast, but you do have to watch how you make them, and it really shouldn't have more than 2 servings of fruit. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so when you're making your smoothie, not your fruit out. I sometimes add a liquid, not necessarily
Like a milk or a water. Mm-hmm.
dairy. It would be like the Nature Valley's
So
juice. No, but they're like
a fruit mix.
a fruit mix.
Okay.
Like those that you see in the store.
Okay,
like I just
great.
know when there's kale, kiwi, no, it's kale, spinach, and romaine or something.
Okay.
It's horrible.
Uh-huh.
It
But
was all the vegetables, and I said, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to mix the vegetables with the fruit, but the vegetable combination and the fruit combination sometimes don't taste too good, so when you put more of the fruit,
okay.
it kind of makes a good effect.
So if you're using a juice that, like if you look at the juice and it really is just vegetables, then it probably isn't going to be that high in calories or that high in sugar, because it is just vegetables. So you can use that in place of a vegetable, because I really think everyone should put at least 1 serving of vegetables into their smoothie, because you really shouldn't be tasting it. Now, if it's a juice, it's going to be a little bit more concentrated, so I can't really speak to that necessarily. I do know that usually when you put berries with green like juices, it tends to bring out more of that dirt flavor. Yeah, it has that like dirt flavor, like very earthy flavor. Yeah. So I would say like to maybe make sure that you have a sweeter fruit, like maybe a melon. With the berries and to just kind of offset it, because you are using the fruit to sweeten it, and that's fine. You can, like I said, you can have 2 servings of fruit in there. That should be enough to sweeten it, even if you're using 4 ounces of juice, which even if you're using juice in a smoothie, if you're using the vegetable juice, 4 ounces should be fine. If you're using a fruit juice, if you use 4 ounces of fruit juice, that counts as one of your fruits. So you gotta watch that. But again, that should sweeten it plenty, because again, it's more concentrated. So 1 serving of fruit is 4 ounces of juice. Yep.
Is it okay to use yogurt and milk also?
Use them both? Yeah, you can use them both, but I would say you really wouldn't need to use like a full 8 ounces of milk and like a 6-ounce container of yogurt. You'd probably be fine with like 4 ounces of milk, yogurt, and if you still needed to thin it out, use water. Okay, just to thin it out that way. Or use the unsweetened almond milks, because that's like nothing. Yeah, the full dairy milks, they're a little, not that they're bad, but they're a little bit higher in calories than some of the plant-based milks, which if you're just using it to thin out your smoothie, are sometimes better, because you're not going to add additional calories into it. But you want to kind of keep a balance so that you're ending up with 1 serving of dairy rather than 2. But I am a big advocate more for the yogurt, the Greek yogurt, because you get more protein into it. So I usually, when I demo smoothies at work, I'm usually using more yogurt and then like the 40-calorie unsweetened almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk, something like that, rather than using regular milk and excluding the yogurt. So. But the smoothies, that's always a good question, because they can be like, Sometimes the things that are keeping us from our weight loss goals are the things that we do every day that we like think are really good for us, and then we're like, oh my God, like I'm consuming an extra 200 calories than I need from that smoothie, and that stupid smoothie is the thing that's doing me in while I go about not eating all this stuff that I don't want. So it's just like, we don't want that to be the thing that's stopping us from losing weight. So it's questions like that, and it's addressing those types of things that's like definitely something that you want to know, because that's the worst. So now we're on to produce, and you really want to have at least 5 servings combined of fruits and vegetables a day. Preferably, I would say 3 vegetables and 2 fruits. You can definitely have 6 servings and do 3 vegetables and 3 fruits, but you should be having at least 3 vegetables a day. You also want to try and vary your colors. Try to find at least one of each kind of color group of vegetable that you like, because every color blocked group of vegetable has different nutrients. So the more you can vary, like if you have 1 green a day, 1 in the orange-red family, and then if you're having like blueberries or beets or something like that, something in that purple-blue family, then you're really hitting all your vitamins through food, which is thumbs up. You know, the more that we can get through what we eat, rather than feeling like we need to rely on, you know, even our multivitamins, even though that's fine to take and it's a good way to supplement what you're not getting through food, the more you can do in varying the color and things that you eat, it's great to get your nutrition through food rather than having to get it from elsewhere. And the other part of produce is it doesn't have to be fresh produce. I know, and I'm guilty of it all the time, like I buy vegetables with the intention, like I'm totally gonna make this, and then like a week later it's stinking up my crisper, and I'm like, great. And you're throwing it out and essentially throwing away money. Frozen vegetables that don't have sauce on them, and frozen fruits that aren't part of pre-mixed smoothie mixes. I know that's a big thing now in the frozen fruit. They like put in like the yogurt cubes and like sugar cubes. But if they're plain frozen vegetables and fruits, they're just as good as fresh, and those are gonna last in your freezer way longer, so you're probably not going to throw them away. Frozen fruits are also great for smoothies because then you don't have to dilute it all with ice, and you're gonna get that nice frozen consistency. I also know with frozen bananas and frozen strawberries, if you have a good blender and you freeze the banana slices or just use the strawberries, you can really make an easy like sorbet and kind of like trick yourself that way. I did the bananas at one of our other stores, and truth be told, it's like the average like customer at this particular store is like 75. And they all thought that they were like gonna eat ice cream, and they weren't listening to me when I was telling them what it was when I made the banana thing. I thought they were gonna like run me out of town because they were like, this isn't ice cream! And I'm like, no, it's not ice cream, it's frozen bananas. And so it's not, I'm not saying it's gonna taste when you do the bananas like ice cream, but it does look like it. It looks like a soft serve. So if you're a banana fan, you know, you're better off like putting a little topping on something like that and having a fruit base rather than an ice cream base. The canned vegetables, those are also, oh, yeah. Sure. Okay. Okay, 2 really good questions. Canned vegetables, and that's my next things after frozen, they're totally fine. You just want to rinse them first, and that's going to get off a lot of the sodium. That's really the only difference between the canned and fresh and frozen is in order to can, you have to use some type of sodium. It's part of the canning process. So that's going to be the only thing, but if you rinse it, that's fine. And as far as beets go, honest to God, because I love beets, I have a pair of gloves, like Rubbermaid gloves, that are devoted to beets in my kitchen. And then I just peel and cut with those gloves on. It actually washes off of like your boards and your knife really easily, as long as you like put it in hot water right away. It's your hands that it stains. But if you have a glove that's like devoted to the fresh ones, it's really easy. And definitely Janet and Katrina can speak to like my love of beets on Facebook. Like over the summer, I have this thing called a spiralizer, and I like highly promote everyone to get one. And spiralized beets are like the best thing ever. It's, oh my God, they're so good. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I do. Zucchini is definitely like, I feel like it's like the first one. Oh, well, do you have the handheld one? Okay. So the handheld one, it's a little more difficult to do anything besides like zucchini, really wide carrots, You might be able to do a potato and a sweet potato depending on the size. But if you find yourself using the handheld one a lot and you really feel like it's making a difference in how many vegetables you eat and that you're consuming more produce, I totally believe everyone should invest in these handheld, in the ones with like the crank, because you can do like everything. You can do apples, pears, parsnips, sweet potato, butternut squash, beets, turnips. What are some other ones that, I'm trying to think of other ones that I've done. But there really is like no limitation. I think eggplant's like the only one you can't do because it'll like mush. But everything else will work in this. And cucumbers will definitely work in the handheld one. You just can't cook cucumbers really because they're so high in water content. They'll just like not really work. But the zucchini is like, that one's great because it's so versatile. So it works really well. And I have a handout on here. It's not necessarily part of the presentation, but it's on how to include more vegetables into your diet. And I do mention the spiralizer on there. And if any of you do own spiralizers, feel free to email me. I have a ton of resources that I can give you to how to use them more and get more creative with it, because I'm like so team spiralize. I love it. Well, the handheld ones are kind of becoming more obsolete because places now are having the larger ones. So I know we don't carry the handheld one anymore because has the handheld one. Yeah, everyone was getting the other one, so we just stopped carrying the handheld one because it was only when it's on sale, it's only $5 more to get the one that can do more vegetables, and I think like a lot of people are just getting it at that point. But you could definitely do a lot with the handheld one. It's certainly a great way to start spiralizing with that. Yeah, those things scare me though, so I know I would cut my finger right off. You could also do a vegetable peeler, and then you could do anything that you want. They just don't have the spaghetti shape in the same way, but you can definitely do that as well. Just sometimes it's all about just changing the shape, changing the way you cook it, to make a vegetable that you didn't like something that you do like. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And that goes too for anyone in this room with kids who are picky vegetable eaters. Sometimes it's just changing the shape, changing the way you cook it. If you're used to just steaming vegetables, nobody really likes like mushy vegetables that don't really have a lot of flavor. They're much more likely to like it if you crisp it by roasting it in the oven or something like that, or making it look like spaghetti and being like, look, it's spaghetti, and they're like, oh my God. So, the kids can be easy in that way. They can be hard in a lot of ways, but sometimes you just have to trick them a little bit and trick ourselves. So the next thing with produce is volumetrics, and I sort of alluded to this slide before. You are watching your portions of the starch on your plate and the protein on your plate, and you are realizing, wow, I'm taking way too much, and you start cutting back on that. You have to put some of the food back somewhere. So put it back via the vegetables. It's a great question. So for meals, I usually say having a cup cooked or like a cup of your grains. So whether that's like quinoa with dinner, rice with dinner, a 6-ounce potato would be 2 servings of your carbs. So that's one where you kind of have to weigh it the first time, like in the supermarket when you go to buy it, so that you could see what a 6-ounce one looks like. You'll be surprised. Most of them are like closer to 8 or 9, and you're like, no. But, you could definitely half it and, use it. But as you start to take away, and then the protein, again, palm of your hand is what you're thinking of. Just one. Well, one for meal. Per meal, yeah. So I think, 3 to 5.5 ounces per meal is more than enough. And a lot of times people, rather than replacing the carbohydrates that they take away with vegetables, people will like take away the rice and be like, I'm gonna throw on another chicken breast, like yay me, more protein. But you really should be, even if you're gonna cut down on your carbohydrates, you should be adding a different vegetable. You shouldn't be doubling your protein, because protein is great, and by all means we need it, especially if you're active and working out. It's great to have after a workout to repair those muscles that you're breaking down, but extra is extra. So if I'm taking away my 150 calories of rice and replacing it with 160 calories of chicken, that doesn't really make sense. So you're much better off replacing it with, a cup of vegetables, which is going to be like 30 calories, and then you've saved 120. and you've upped your nutritional a lot because you're eating really good for you fruits and vegetables, or just vegetables, which have more fiber, more vitamins, more nutrition. Whereas protein foods, especially animal proteins, they kind of just have protein. They don't have fiber. You know, they don't have a lot of the antioxidants that vegetables have. So, you know, have your protein in your meals, but don't feel like that's where you need to double up. Double up on your vegetables, or have a vegetable and have a piece of fruit, you know, with your dinner, have an applesauce, something like that. Always go for the extra there rather than going for it with the proteins and the carbohydrates. And I put down here, for example, 100 calories of cooked broccoli, you're getting about 2 cups. And that's kind of hard to get through because broccoli is so filling, it's so cruciferous, it's going to take up a lot of space in your stomach, and it's going to be kind of difficult to get through 2 cups worth of broccoli. But if we're thinking of a more calorie-dense food, for example, like a piece of steak, an ounce of ribeye steak, an ounce, which is about the size of like 2 dice stacked like up on top of each other, that's 100 calories. So again, volumetrics, you get more when you eat the more nutrient-dense foods. It's harder, you know, to portion and eat the right amounts of the more calorie-dense ones, so you want to try to, you know, volumize it with more. Same with pasta. If you're going to measure out sort of a cup of pasta cooked, which is more what you should be having in a meal, bulk it up with, you know, chopped tomatoes, put some, you know, there are some healthy chicken sausages out there, or even just cut up leftover chicken or shrimp. Bulk it up with the stuff that you know you have to be having so that you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just eating this little amount. Mm-hmm. Great. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. So if that's an issue, I would say there are 2, you can, it sounds funny, but taking the Beanos and the Gas-X, they're out there for a reason, and taking them daily, that helps a lot of people. There's also a more natural supplement, it's called a charcoal supplement, and that's supposed to help as well. But believe it or not, sometimes, not if it's a chronic problem, and obviously if it's causing you pain, but gas can be good sometimes because it's actually sort of the good bacteria breaking down the things in our gut and getting rid of some of the bad. So a little bit of gas isn't a bad thing. And if you've gone from like eating no fiber, I know. I talk about bathroom stuff all the time, so like for me to say that, I'm like, oh, whatever. Gas is great. What was I gonna say? Now I lost my train of thought. Not in my office. If you're going from like eating 5 to 10 grams of fiber a day, like it was really low, and then all of a sudden you're eating like 25 to 35, which is more within what we should, you're gonna have gas. Your stomach's gonna react to that because it's not used to it. So, you know, you definitely want to kind of like creep it up with the fiber and expect to maybe have some like adverse stomach effects while you get used to it. The other part, when you add more fiber into your diet, you have to hydrate more. Otherwise, the fiber just, you know, it's doing its bulking thing, but you got to hydrate with water so that it's, you know, moving things the way that fiber's supposed to be. Otherwise, you're not really doing as much good if you don't have the water complementing the increase in fiber that you're having. So, very good question. So next slide is about plant-based, and I've sort of touched on this with, you know, protein being absolutely, it's important, but the American diet places way too much of an overemphasis on protein. It's probably one of the reasons why our country is less healthy than a lot of these other countries that are more of a plant-based lifestyle. So yes, that includes what I've, you know, sort of been hammering with the fruits and vegetables, but it also includes fat not being the enemy. Dietary experts state that up to 35% fat in the diet can actually be a healthy diet when it's coming from things like nuts and oils and seeds and fatty fish and things like that. All of those things have a lot of important compounds to keeping us healthy. So you don't want to rely on animal-based products to become the majority of your diet. One way that sometimes you can think of it and start to kind of cut down is thinking about trying to, prior to dinner, eat, you know, a couple days a week, try to eat like vegetarian or pescatarian, which is including fish, during the day, and then know you're going to have your meat at dinner. but it's kind of a helpful and a little bit easy way to a couple days a week, just during the day, try to really include a lot of plant-based foods, because those are the disease fighters. Those are the filling, high-fiber foods that have a lot of good nutrition that can really start to help us heal from within, rather than continue with this sort of Western, really highly animal product-based diet that usually ends up giving us some kind of chronic condition down the line, unfortunately, in this country. And again, meat can definitely be a part of your diet. There's been, this was a sort of positive time a few months ago for me when it came out that dietary cholesterol, the intake of that, more and more research is showing that it doesn't necessarily raise blood cholesterol. So a lot of people took that to mean like, yay, like I can eat like high cholesterol meats and foods again. But most of those foods are still high in saturated fat, and that we know isn't good for us. We only want, out of the total fat that we're consuming, 7 to 10% of the total fat we're consuming should be saturated fat. So we're, I think I put an example on there of if you have a 1,600 calorie diet with 30% fat consumption, that's only about 5 grams of saturated fat that you want to be having in a day. And I think I wrote down a Big Mac has 13 grams saturated, not total fat, just the saturated. So it's really easy, again, with the red meats to be over your saturated fat content. So it's not that you can't have it, but certainly, infusing other things into your diet, and again, just making sure you're eating the correct portion size is really important. And believe it or not, burgers are actually a good portion size. A lot.
I'm about to get some shrimp fried rice.
There's always one in the room.
I'm gonna get the small containers. Is that a good thing?
She was asking about the olive oil, the canola oil, and frying. Generally, you don't fry with the olive oil because it doesn't reach a certain temperature, but it is really a saute that you do.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, but they have some that's for frying. And
It's a blend, and it's blended.
Sauteing, it says it on the bottle. It
It
has
is a
some for.
blend.
I'm talking about what the bottle says.
No, I'm saying, it probably is a blend for you. It's blended with something else. Because the olive oil can't reach a certain temperature before it burns.
That's a chef you talking.
I can look. If you want to email me the brand that you're using of like the one that you're frying with, and I can take a look into whether it's any different, I'll definitely.
Okay.
Because I don't know
Maybe
exactly.
it is, I don't know, but usually it does that.
Yeah.
So then it's okay, because you're just sauteing. You're not frying.
No, well, I mean, I don't need the fried foods, but I need to deep fry it with the olive oil because it doesn't come out as greasy as usual vegetables.
It's doing like a fried chicken. Like something else.
Shelbi.